Rick, thank you so much. Welcome to everybody. I want to begin today by referencing a teaching you may have heard on Monday from Rabbi Marcello, who asked a question about the times in which we find ourselves and about the mindfulness practice we're engaged in. He asked, what happens if you don't like the present where you find yourself? And there is one answer he did not give. He did not say, you can complain. That wasn't one of the options on his menu. But I notice in looking at this week's Torah portion, B'halotcha, that it is a very popular answer. And it's popular not only in the Parsha, but obviously in our own times, in our own lives as well. There's an old expression that I love. Jews are just like everybody else, only more so. It is a human foible to complain, but the Israelites turned complaining and kvetching into a high art in their desert wanderings, and particularly in this week's Torah portion. So I want to talk about that and look at complaining and perhaps some antidotes to complaining. And I'm going to begin by sharing my screen with an example in the Torah portion that is probably the most neutral complaint. Some might even say it actually doesn't qualify as a complaint. And the circumstance is that they were celebrating the first anniversary of the Exodus from Egypt, which required a Paschal offering. And some people had come into contact with corpses. And in biblical law, anybody who comes close to the nexus between life and death, particularly if they touch a corpse or have any kind of direct proximity to a corpse even, is ritually impure and not eligible to enter into the sacrificial system. So therefore, the people who had this experience were not going to be able to participate in the Passover sacrifice. And they approached Moses and said, although we are impure by reason of a corpse, why must we be held back from presenting the sacrifice at its set time together with the rest of the Israelites? So you could say this is merely an appeal, or you could say there's a tone, lama nigra, why are you shoving us backwards? Why should we be pushed back? There's a tone slightly of complaint here, but yet it's respectful. And Moses has this very humble answer. He says, Imdu ve'eshma'a ma yitzaveh Adonai lachem. Stand by, stand still, and let me listen and learn. Shema means to listen, to heed, and to understand or learn. Let me listen and learn what God commands concerning you. And this only happens a few times in the entire Torah, where someone comes to Moses with a question or a new situation arises, and Moses says, wait a minute, I have to ask the boss. I'm not sure about this one. So this is one of those times, and the answer comes back with Pesach Sheni. There is a second chance. There is a second Passover exactly 1 month later for anyone who may have missed the first one by reason of ritual impurity. So before we move ahead to look at some other examples in B'halotcha, I would love to invite people to type in the chat, what do you associate with complaining? What leads to it? What comes from it? What happens in your feelings? What happens in one's behavior? What are the social consequences? Whatever you associate when I say complaining, what do you think of? And please just go ahead and type in the chat. I see frustration, entitlement, blame, pessimism, not accepting, taking it personally, hurt, unhappiness, kvetching. It's going by too quickly. Somebody said, my mother, oi. Okay. Whining, negativity. You can see, looking down this list, irritation, judgment, being uncomfortable, disappointment, fear. And there's very little here that's positive, you may have noticed. Almost nothing. I mean, I'm sure there are positive things about your mother as well as her complaining or her leading to complaints, but a sense of venting may feel temporarily like a relief, but there's very little that's long-term good or happy in this giant list that we're seeing of what you associate with complaining. Now I'm going to show you my list here that I created, and it's a little word cloud, and some of them are big, some of them are small, just for the visual of it. But I will tell you that every single thing listed on this particular word cloud relates to something that happens in this week's Torah portion. There's gossip that happens, there's envy that happens, there's nostalgia for a non-existent past that happens, there's drama, there are sweeping judgments, there's freezing, there's fighting, there's fleeing, there's lust. We're going to see it all. So I just am pulling out a few examples with the Hebrew attached to them that I'll talk about. First of all, complaint has to do with rejecting or resenting authority sometimes. This is what is said of the Israelites when they demand meat instead of manna. And they're told, you have rejected, you have disrespected God. That's something that happens with complaining. And then also with regard to the manna on the left-hand side of the slide, you'll see they're not appreciating what they have. Uvaredet hatal yared haman. It's amazing. The manna comes up the way dew comes up. It falls from the sky is the description. It falls from the sky like dew. The manna just shows up on the ground. You don't have to work for it. You don't have to invest anything. And not only that, the rabbinic sources tell us that it could taste like anything in the world. So there it is, your food ready and prepared for you, and yet you're still complaining. And then there's lust and gluttony. We must have meat. We must. And we have to have it our way and in this timing. And then there's exaggeration. Ain kol, there's nothing except this manna. Really? There's a pillar of cloud guiding you. There's a fire by night. There's miraculous water in the desert. The manna can taste like anything. Really? There's nothing? And then Moses also exaggerates at one point, saying, I have to carry the whole people. There's nostalgia for this non-existent past. We'll look into that in more detail. I remember the flesh pots of Egypt. Wasn't it wonderful? No, you are actually a slave. And we see some people right now today in the United States saying, wasn't everything wonderful back in the 1950s? Well, no, some things were wonderful and not everything was wonderful. There were people who had serious levels of oppression at the time. And we need to pay attention to that. There's jealousy. Hamekana'ata li. This comes up when Joshua sees people prophesying in the camp. Now, it's remarkable because you would think that'd be good news. But instead of seeing it as good news, Joshua tries to control other people. And he says, Kala'em, stop them, arrest them. And Moses answers, are you jealous on my behalf? Because I think it's a good thing if we have more prophets. Let them prophesy. And there's envy and sibling rivalry when Miriam and Aaron are complaining against Moses. So no shortage of examples of complaints. But in our original example and in life, there are many other choices. Notice what Moses did. Imdu. Stand by. Sometimes the best thing to do in the face of an assault you're tempted to complain about, any kind of trigger, is to wait. The solution may arise from elsewhere. There may come an apology. Things may resolve without your having to be the one to spew anything negative. And there's also a process of gathering information that Moses says, let me hear, let me learn what is the right thing to do. And there's the advocacy, the stepping forward that's done by the people who came in contact with corpses. Why should we step back? Sometimes you need, in the face of an injustice or being overlooked, to step forward and assert yourself in a respectful way. These are all good solutions. And in the word cloud, you can see all sorts of options for what is the opposite of complaining. Forgiving, showing gratitude, liberating yourself, enjoying what you have, showing humility as Moses did in this instance, appealing for justice, demanding justice, having patience, being kind, and so much more. And then we have one of the great examples of positivity against all the complaints in this Torah portion. And it's interesting where it happens. It happens when Moses is talking to an outsider. He's talking to Yitro, his father-in-law, a Midianite. And to the outside, he says all the wonderful things. Gee, it's been great. And we're guilty of this sometimes. About our synagogue, about our school, about our child, about our organization. To the outside world, we tell them they're wonderful. You're going to love it. Come join us. Watch my kid. Everything's terrific. And then we go home and we complain to and about those people. So Moses said to Yitro, come along with us on this journey, because God has done so much good for us, and God wants to do good for you, and it'll be good for you if you come with us, and we want to be generous and good to you, and the goodness and beneficence of God will overflow over everything. The word tov appears so many times in this verse, and yet when we look at the rest of the Torah portion, including at Moses, it doesn't look so rosy. But there is a choice to look at it this way, and I don't think Moses is being disingenuous. Now, I just want to look again, and I have my personal reaction at the top of the page. Really? We remember not just the fish that we used to eat free in Egypt, but the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, the garlic. Really what they ate was bottom right of your screen. They ate the bread of affliction. Matzah was a slave food because it stuck to your ribs. They didn't have a varied diet. They weren't well cared for. But it's telling what they say at the end. Now our nafshenu, which can mean throat or gullet or soul, is parched. Our gullets, our souls are parched. There's nothing at all, nothing but this manna to look to. Meaning, because of where my focus is, all I see is what I perceive as a deficit. They're not even seeing the manna in proper perspective from what we as readers know. It arrives so easily, so beautifully, so consistently, so miraculously every single day in the desert, a double portion on Friday for Shabbat. But they don't see that. They're not looking at that. They're only looking at what they don't have. Now, what's interesting is that Moses is also guilty of complaint. And he complains about people complaining. Now, I don't know if you've ever been there, but I've been guilty of that one. Oh, the Jews, they can't stop complaining. I cannot carry all this people by myself. It's too much for me. And the chutzpah of saying to God, I'm doing it alone. But notice what God says here. God says, you need help. You need delegation. Let me gather 70 people to help you, and you won't have to carry it alone. Sometimes in response to the complaint of another, we can just hear the stress and the angst and the anxiety underneath. We don't have to respond to the attack. And this is what God does here. It's also telling that in the language about getting the people the food they want, Moses says, we're going to need all the fish in the sea. He doesn't see things in proportion. Now, of course, God says, I can deliver whatever's needed. There's nothing too great for me. But it's this tendency to exaggerate, to globalize when we're in a complaining mindset that's really notable here for our purposes today. Now, the end of the Torah portion has the famous episode where Moses and Aaron Aaron and Miriam complain about Moses and his wife, and they express jealousy. Hasn't God spoken through us as well? And Moses responds with humility, and Aaron responds by, in a sense, taking back what he said. Don't make us carry the sin which we committed in our folly. Help us step back from what we said. Moses prays for healing for Miriam, who is stricken with leprosy. And importantly, all the people wait for Miriam. So there is prayer for healing, there is expression of regret, and there is waiting and including people back into the fold, even after the damage that can be wrought after complaint and gossip. So I want to ask you now, as we prepare to enter into the meditation, to think about a complaint that you have. It shouldn't be the biggest complaint you can think of, but maybe a serious one, whatever first comes to mind, large or small, that is a complaint of yours. And we're going to take that with us into meditation, just in the background. And I'm going to lead you a meditation that's focused both on breath and on awareness of complaint. May bring up feelings, obviously, when we think about complaints. When I always try my meditations on myself when I create them, and this one sort of felt like a stone in my chest when I said, think of a complaint. And that's okay. Just note whatever comes up for you, and we'll have a chance to breathe through it and to come out on the other side in a better state, I hope, and with greater awareness. So I invite you to allow your eyes to close or soften your gaze. And feel yourself supported where you are. Adjust your posture if you need to. Take in 3 slow, deep breaths before just breathing as you will. And if no complaint of yours came to mind, then in this time, just allow something to bubble up. And if you notice tightness or discomfort anywhere in your body, just imagine that the oxygen you're breathing in is going right to those points of tension and helping them unwind and unravel and relax. Each breath in brings healing, and each breath out allows release. Each breath in, healing. Each breath out, release. You might feel yourself a bit heavier where you are, and more relaxed. Now with your in-breaths for the next short while, focus your awareness on your complaint. That doesn't mean going into the story, it just means noting the existence of your complaint, almost seeing it like an object in front of you. Look at your complaint the way a geologist would look at a rock. There it is. I'm curious. Maybe a rock or another visual comes to mind, and if so, just let that picture stand for the complaint every time you breathe in. And as you breathe in and out, holding that complaint in your awareness, observing it, try simultaneously to relax your body. Just lower your shoulders, slacken your jaw, let your belly be soft. Let your hands be limp. As you keep your complaint in your awareness, you're not dismissing anything, you're not magnifying anything, you're not justifying anything. You're just observing what is already true for you. You have a complaint, and this is it. We're breathing in and out with that truth. Just keep breathing through any feelings that may come up. And now breathe in whatever response might be artful and healing in relation to your complaint. You don't have to plan what that will be. Just allow some thoughts or intuitions or phrases or visuals to come up, and I'll make some suggestions that may prompt you, but it could be anything. Maybe you can ask for help. Maybe you can show yourself more compassion. Maybe you can claim the lesson or the motivation that arises from this complaint and hold onto that more than onto the complaint itself. Maybe there is something to let go. You can always just continue to breathe and give more space around your complaint. Take some moments and breathe with what is artful, what is resourceful, what is helpful, what is healing around this complaint. And just keep breathing and invite in any answers or any intuitions about how you might relate to your complaint in a way that is healing and healthy for you. Now, if you choose to, as an act of caring, put your hand over your heart or over your gut or on your head or over your throat, wherever in your body you may feel that it would be helpful or healing to you. It's not easy to go on a journey. Along the way, it's the human condition that we will have complaints. It's not easy to go on a journey of awareness, and we have sometimes good reason to resist the present. So just breathe in and breathe out with compassion. And honor your courage and your healing. Whatever came up or didn't come up on a conscious level, You have surrounded complaint with spaciousness. Anna elna refana la, Anna elna refana la, Anna elna refana la, Anna elna refana la. Heal our bodies, open our hearts, awaken our minds, yeah. Heal our bodies, open our hearts, awaken our minds, Shekhinah. Anna elna refana la, Anna elna refana la. Whenever you're ready, gently rub your hands together and open your eyes.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Debra Orenstein. Such a beautiful, beautiful practice today, and one that I'm sure we all can relate to and really use in our lives. Let me speaking for myself. So let's stay with that practice as we hold space for those who are in mourning, or observing yard sites, or whose custom it is to participate in Kaddish. If you're not reciting Kaddish, as I said, you just stay with the practice, stay present, and offer your compassionate support for those who are invited to put the name or names of those they're holding in their heart today in the chat box, either now or after you recite Kaddish, and to join me by rising in body or in spirit to recite the words together. Yitgadal,
Yitkadash, Shmei Rabba,
Alma Divra
Ma Divra
Chemte,
Yamlik Makute, Chayechon, Uvyomechon, Uchaydecho Beit Israel, Va'agalah, Bizman Kariv, V'imru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabba, La'alam U'Lalamei Hamayam, Yitbarach, Yishtabach, Yitpa'al, Yitromam, Yitnaseh, Yithadar, V'Yimaleh, V'Yimal, Shmei Kedusha, Berichu, Le'ela Mikol Berchata, V'Shirata, Tushbechata, V'Nechama, V'Amiran, V'Yadama, V'Imru, Amen. Yehei Shalom, Ragavim Shamaya, V'Chayim Tovim Aleinu, V'Al Kol Yisrael, Kol Yoshevei Tevel, V'Imru, Amen. Shalom, B'Imrama, Aleinu v'al Kol Yisrael v'al Kol Yoshevei Tevel v'imru. Amen.
Amen.
Friends, thank you so much, as always, for joining us today for our practice. And I want to thank our teacher for today, Rabbi Debra Orenstein, and put in the chat box the link to Rabbi Debra's website, where you can get more information about all the wonderful resources that Rabbi Debra offers, and opportunities to continue to learn and practice with her. And Debra, grateful to you for both, as I said, for the teaching, and also just for you helping to constitute this community, a practice, and hold it together over this long period of time. And of course, thanks to Will Priest for holding our text space, as always, so beautifully today. And most of all, thanks to all of you for just showing up for yourself and for each other. You're welcome to stay on, as always, for conversation about today's teaching and with Rabbi Debra. And if you're not, we hope you'll join us tomorrow. We'll be led in practice, sit into Shabbat on Fridays, since we love to describe it, sit into Shabbat together. We'll be led by Rabbi Sheva Gold and my colleague Michal Fox-Smart, who is our Chief Program Officer, will be filling in for me to host tomorrow. So we hope you'll join us then. And then next week for practice, just a reminder, as I mentioned yesterday, that Rabbi Jonathan Slater, who is going to be honored as part of the sponsorship, will be leading our practice next Tuesday, and Kendra Lissu Shamash, who's leads our yoga sessions on Mondays, will lead us in practice as well on Wednesday. So looking forward to that. So if you're leaving us, we hope to see you soon. And if you're not, if you have a question for Rabbi Debra, please put it in the chat box and preface it with question in all caps. And otherwise, just feel free to add your reflections or thoughts on the teaching or your experience today. Debra, this was really great, really great. And, I loved, I don't know what the right term is, whether colloquial is the right term. I'll have to look it up. But I really love how you interject those things, like, as in Moshe saying, gee, I don't know, I got to ask the boss on that one. Let me check with the manager, what to do in this situation. I think that, I don't know if you remember off the top of your head, but that doesn't happen very often. But it's one of the remarkable things about how the Torah describes Moshe as willing to say, I don't know, I need to find out, I need to consult on that, as an expression of humility, of anava. But what I wanted to ask you is just to kind of review the teaching again, just to slow the process down. Like, one of the things I appreciated about this teaching was that it didn't say, like, stop complaining, stop being such a fetch. It recognized that complaining serves a function, and it comes up. It's there, and you invited us just to notice it and to create some space by using the teaching from Moshe, to stand by and listen. Let's investigate with curiosity what this is about. And instead of reacting, building on the reaction of the complaint, substituting a response that's really was so beautifully, graphically represented in the word clouds that you created. So I wanted to invite you just to kind of review that first of all, to see if I got that right. And, I think it's really helpful for people to hold on to that. So every time we experience a moment of complaint internally or express it externally, we can bring this practice into play.
Right. So thank you. Beautifully summarized, I think. I'll say a couple things. Yeah, it is an expression of humility, obviously, to say, I don't know, when Moses says that. And the times when he does consult tend to be times, there are few in number, but they tend to be times when there's an issue of justice and inclusion. Like another time is Benot Tzlofchad, when the daughters of Tzlofchad said, what about us?
Right.
Our father didn't have sons, and who's going to inherit his land? And there's, interestingly, in both those cases, with the daughters of Tzlofchad and with the people who are impure, there's a sense of defensiveness. We didn't do anything wrong. We were just in touch with a dead body. Our father wasn't part of the assembly of Korach. He was just a man without sons. And I think that happens when we're excluded. Sometimes we go right to complaining, and sometimes we go to, what did I do wrong? And both of those are represented in this week's Parsha. But the other thing I would say about complaining in terms of how it works, and what are the mechanisms, and when is it allowed? I mean, the sense that injustice is out there gives us a kind of a righteous indignation and a desire in some ways to complain. And sounding the alarm can be a very important role in this world. And there are people who know how to, what we might say, complain, point out what isn't just right, inclusive, etc., in a way that moves everybody forward.
Yeah.
But that the fetching style, the sort of rehearsing injuries that happen to you, that's not particularly helpful, as we saw from that amazing flood of associations that happened in the chat.
That was great.
And I remember years ago, I was teaching on gratitude, this was many years ago, and I asked, what to you is the opposite of gratitude? And people were sort of stunned by the question, because I think people assume it's, I think I just said that backwards. What's the opposite of complaining? And people assume the answer is gratitude. Because when you complain about something, the sort of should of it is, well, you should be grateful. You shouldn't complain. You should be grateful.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes the answer to a complaint is not a should of gratitude. Sometimes the answer is we need a change in public policy. Sometimes the answer is I need help. I need a nap. You know, I need to lower the temperature here. I need to forgive. I need to let go. I need to delegate. There's 1,000, or sometimes it is, I need to notice my blessings. My eyes, as in the Parsha, are only on this small section of what my reality is. And the truth is, I do have a lot to be grateful for, and there's a bigger perspective. But sort of shooting people into gratitude and away from complaint doesn't really work. I'll tell you a great story, and I wrote an article about this years ago called "But Who's Complaining?" about another time in the Torah when Moses complains. And I cited the work of the Reverend Bill Bowen. Years ago, he created a little doodad for his church. It was a small bracelet that said "A Complaint-Free World." And he gave it out. And he suggested that everybody put it on one of their wrists, and whenever they complain, switch wrists to notice how often you actually complain without being aware of it. And he said the goal was to go for 21 days without complaining. So when I heard about this, I wrote away for one of the bracelets. And I was told there was a waiting list because over 5 million people.
I hope you complained about that. Why didn't they anticipate that?
Who do you complain to?
That's outrageous.
A complaint-free world. It's a problem. So anyway, what the final statistic that really charmed me was they had to close to 6 million bracelets that they sent out, and fewer than 300 people who said that they made it 21 full days. So it is the human condition, and it's forgivable. But if we all just oriented ourselves a little bit more toward all the positives that were in that word cloud, toward gratitude, toward forgiveness, toward patience, toward sometimes giving people the space and waiting them out, toward all the different concepts that may have come up during the meditation, then we're just going to all be so much better off. And the world will be a better place.
I want to get to this really great question by Lori. And first, I just want to follow up with what you just said, which was just to really parse it, that the complaint, there's an aspect of complaining, which is identifying something which is not as we have a sense it should be, like the way you were describing it. And then there's the pleasure of the complaining that feeds on itself. Like it feels so, there's a reward built into feeling, so, like you said, self-righteous or better than, or like that almost can feel more important than actually solving the problem, right? So I think for me, that's in that space that's created, that you're saying, just like notice the complaint, not judge the complaint, just notice and say, okay, what I really want here is a solution, and I want to work towards a solution. And that takes some of the heat out of, the excess heat, maybe, right? Turns thinking about it like my stove has an ultra heat flame for boiling water quickly, and then it has regular, to turn the temperature down just so that it's, there's a nice simmer, right? So that it's warm enough to look for the solution, but not so hot that it's out of control.
Well, I would say one thing about that, Mark, is that I think, it would be inhuman if you never needed to vent. That's right. If you never needed to do that. But the key is, I think, having sort of a covenant with yourself and maybe a few other people who are close to you about how you're going to do it and when and how much time you're going to give it. Is it days? Is it weeks? Is it years? How long are you going to stay in that loop? I remember that same Reverend Will Bowen, who invented the exercise, he said, when he really felt a need to complain, he and his wife had a little code where he would, if he was just supremely aggravated by somebody, he would say, "He sure can whistle." And that was a code for, I'm so fed up with this. I want to just, vent
look for the good. Right.
But it was a way of giving a code. I think you can have a covenantal complaint partner. I think you can have a way of talking to people. There has to be a safe space to do that. But then, as you said, to gear ourselves to look more towards solutions.
All right. So on the other hand, there's this question by Lori who wrote, I'm so trained to not complain, but rather to look for the good or the improvement solution. Like for some people, the issue is not complaining. The issue is that they avoid, the complaining. Creating space to complain and be held in it is so powerful. Actually, it was what you're just describing, right? How can I bring a complaint practice healthfully into my life as part of a healing and sanity maintenance? Fantastic question.
Yeah, so I think I guess my brain went ahead. I didn't see that, but I
That's right. That
anticipated it by saying, and I do think, look, everybody's different. We're all always striving for that Shvil Hazahav, that sort of golden mean. And if the reason you're not complaining is you just accept insult after insult to you and you allow yourself to be mistreated, that's not a good life balance either. So there's all sorts of gradations to this, but I think the key is being mindful about it and really looking at it. And to the extent that you're the geologist looking at the rock, there's strata there. So maybe there's a history to what happened when I was a child and I complained. What was that met with? Did people say, "Oh, let me help you solve that problem," or did you get shamed for offering a complaint?
That's great. There's also thanks, Barak. Barak is saying maybe we should allow ourselves to vent 7 minutes a day, as Reb Nachman says. We should cry our hearts out for 7 minutes a day. That's like you could bring it into what's called heat bodedut practice, where one goes off on their own to basically to have a conversation with God, however you understand God. And it could be complaining, could be just like, and it relates now back to a question by Lester about can complaining be part of prayer practice? So I wanted to throw that one to you, Debra, too, about Lester asks, can complaining be integrated into tefillah, into prayer? I'm thinking about those intermediate blessings, the petitionary prayers in the Amidah, where we're asking for our needs, which maybe are an opportunity for thinking about
and I think
complaining to God.
Yeah, and to the extent that Psalms are the lion's share of what constitute our prayer book, Psalms are full of complaint.
Yeah.
And they bounce back and forth between God, stop abandoning me to I put my faith in you.
Right.
And that leads me to a suggestion of an exercise also, that sometimes if you do sort of automatic kind of stream of consciousness writing and you start with your complaint, you can go from the recommendation that I have is you start with anger, because that's usually the tip of the iceberg. I'm angry about this, etc. And if you write long enough, that tends to turn into hurt. I'm hurt because, and if you write long enough, that turns into fear. I'm afraid of what this means, of what it happens. I'm afraid about my relationship. I'm afraid about how I'm seen. I'm afraid about the consequences. And then if you keep writing long enough, it turns into wants and needs. That, and here's what I wish for. And then if you keep writing past that, it turns into love, because I care about myself, you, the institution, whatever the source of the complaint is. And so that's another good way to get to it without denying the negative feelings, but getting past and through them to what's, olam chesed yibaneh, what's at the base, what's at the bottom of it, I think is often this sense of love. Because if you were truly indifferent, it wouldn't be a complaint. It would just be a thing that flew by you and it wouldn't matter.
It just shows that I care.
Being irate just shows that I care.
And it's true, like so what you said. I mean, it shows that I care. So this is such a great topic. It's so rich, and I can see from the chat lots of really good questions, and I think you've responded to, in general, at least a lot of them. So hopefully we have a chance to continue the conversation. But meanwhile, we all have an opportunity to just be mindful and aware of the propensity to complain and to embrace what is healthy and sacred in it, and to dispense with the rest. And this practice really is something like what you're describing it, Debra. It's like, moving from what, keep peeling the onion the way you describe, right? To peel from anger to fear. What was after fear?
Anger, hurt, fear.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And eventually the love. That just a reminder that this practice is really a practice of in an ongoing way of noticing and peeling layers of the onion of our experience over the course of the day. So may this practice stay with each of us. And really, Kol HaKavod, Debra, was a beautiful teaching and a really important practice for all of us. So thanks again for leading us as usual. I'm going to put into the chat one more time your website for people.
And I want to acknowledge Susan, who said, I'm complaining that this session is over, which was delightful.
Okay, well, speak to our complaint department. And we hope to see you all tomorrow for practicing with Rabbi Shepa Gold. And